My next guest is an expert in these areas, Fifth Third Bank Chief Investment Strategist, Jeff Korzenik. Jeff, it is interesting that in the middle of all this and the back and forth with China, whether they could trust us, we could trust them, the president is one deal after another. Is that subtle pressure or not so subtle?
I think it's pressure and also a reminder to the business community that this is not an anti-trade administration. Their trade concerns are very focused with China. I think the focus on energy is particularly interesting because of how far we have to go in building up the U.S. as an energy exporter. The ripple effects in the rest of the economy, you may know, a quarter of all manufacturing activity in the United States is attributable to the energy industry.
Is that right?
That is.
More than I thought. You know what's interesting, too? I'm old enough to remember, Jeff, when we didn't have that luxury, and we depended on OPEC for everything. Then, came fracking, then came just the discovery of our large, natural gas storage and just supply that now is getting to be a big export business for us.
Capitalism is a very good problem solver. We see that in energy. We see that in other areas. Our focus at Fifth Third is looking at how capitalism is starting to address some of our workforce deficiencies and the labor shortage.
Let me ask you a little bit about what's going on with China now. I don't know when these talks resume. I do know that already a number of U.S. companies are making contingency plans. Nintendo might make a lot more of its stuff out of China now. Ditto Foxconn indicating that, a lot of these phones presently, iPhones that they make right now in China could be made elsewhere. That has got to put the pressure on the Chinese.
It does, and I think some of this may be irreversible. We compare this.
In other words, even if we get a deal.
Even if we get a deal, we think American industry is readdressing their supply chain, similar to it did in the wake of 2011 when natural disasters disrupted the chip industry, the auto industry. That's when we saw the stop of the bleeding of manufacturing employment in the United States.
I'm veering a little bit out of control here, but what's going on in Hong Kong now kind of reminds me a lot of what we saw in Tiananmen Square in 1989. I know it's very different, and we hope it remains very different. But it is calling into question trading with a country that could ratchet this up to the degree it has, right?
One of the things that the trade disputes have really shifted the conversation is the public perception and the global government perception of China, and there's a wider recognition that there's not as many values that we share.
Do you think that China's watching all these developments and saying, gosh, I guess they can do without us?
I think that is part of it. It's also a fortunate time in that productivity is picking up. That's keeping a lid on inflationary pressures. It's keeping growth in good shape despite some of these pressures. There's nothing from a purely economic standpoint, there's nothing good about trade disputes. Free trade is a good thing, but from a political standpoint and a citizen's viewpoint, there are reasons why we might want to put trade barriers in place and keep them in place. This is a good time to have that conversation.
Yeah, it's always good to come from a position of strength.
That's right.
Rather than the other way around. Jeff, thank you. And he was very patient through all this breaking news to stay here. A lot of guests just up and go and say, that's it, I'm out of here. He was very gracious about that.